On today's episode, we take a look at someone contributing to the misinformation surrounding abortion. Learn that teaching someone how to fish, as opposed to just giving them a fish to eat, means you are a jerk. Learn that economic activity, not the Federal Reserve, is the cause of inflation. And finally, we'll learn that if your faith compels you to not participate in certain activities, you're just a bigot. This is Cringe Posts. Hey friends, welcome to this episode of the Cringe Post podcast. This is the podcast where we gather the cringiest political and cultural takes that we see in our feeds each week. We take them on, show where they went wrong, and have a little bit of fun and a laugh along the way. My name's Britt, and I'm here with my co-host Donnie. And before we get started, make sure to like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. And if you are listening to this podcast and you want to see any of the posts that we go through, go to cringepost.com for the visual show companion. Now, before we take on other people's posts, we always like to poke a little bit of fun at ourselves. And today, because I'm hosting, we get to poke fun at, I guess we kind of get to poke fun at both of us here, actually. We got a post from Donnie, July 11th, 2016. And he posts on Facebook, "Congratulations to Theresa May, the UK's next Prime Minister, Iron Lady 2.0, question mark. And this is liked by a bunch of people, including yours truly, Britt Espinosa, and myself. You know, to be honest with you, I'm not really well versed in the UK politics. I know that Margaret Thatcher is not necessarily the hero that everyone would like to think that she is. Enlighten me a little bit more on this, because
I mean, regardless, Margaret Thatcher is very controversial. I think she's hated on by a lot of people where she shouldn't be, and then she's praised by people where she shouldn't be as well. You know, like most politicians, you know, not all one way or the other. But I think that the worst part about this is, to me, and the reason why I picked it is because it's me espousing some notion or thought because I watched one of her speeches. And then it was like, oh, maybe she's the next Margaret Thatcher based. And it's like, what? I don't know what I'm talking about. I don't study UK politics in depth. Like, I keep up with them, but I don't study them in depth. I didn't know who she was prior to this. I didn't know her track record, but it was like one of those things where it's like, ooh, you know, maybe someone had suggested, like an article could have said, could she be the next Margaret Thatcher? And I'm like, you know, on board with that because she you know, spun a good speech kind of a thing. And it's like, oh, don't chime into things you don't know about, Donald. Stop it.
That's fair. That's kind of like the little bit more advanced version of me calling John McCain a maverick because I saw a Newsweek article calling him that. I didn't know why. I just thought, oh, the trusted sources said this, so it must be true.
Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, like you alluded to earlier, it's not even like Margaret Thatcher's that great, but if you were to take the maybe the better characteristics of Margaret Thatcher, I think Theresa May completely failed on all of those anyway. You know, she was so tepid on Brexit, didn't actually do it, wouldn't pull through, and was really a big nothing burger. So it's just very funny for me to be highlighting maybe she'll be the complete antithesis of what she was, like I had any idea.
Yeah. I don't have any more on that. I don't know much about that, all that stuff. So it's just, you had to self-own yourself, I guess.
That's it, yeah.
All right. Moving on to our next one. These are other people's cringe posts, and the first one we've got up is, this person tweets, "I had a miscarriage last night, and the first thing I had to do was Google if I broke a law. I didn't even know I was pregnant. I was 8 days late. Just sit with that for a second." And I think this is kind of indicative of the larger argument about the Roe v. Wade decision being overturned and all this, and that people are saying claims like women are going to die, or women don't even know that they're pregnant, or maybe women that have miscarriages, that's technically an abortion. You know, they misclassify all these different things that happen, when really an abortion is just going in with a medical procedure with the intent to kill an unwanted baby that lives inside you. And so what's unfortunate, whether this person is genuinely believes this or is kind of espousing this story and this feeling that they have to try and make a point, and it's a little bit disingenuous, I think it's indicative that, there is a lot of misinformation about this topic out there. And the only type of life that is threatened by Roe v. Wade being overturned and misinformation being spread by is by the pro-choice crowd. The folks saying, oh, you won't be able to get an ectopic pregnancy, injecting that lie into the discourse makes it so that even doctors of goodwill are a little bit confused about whether they can actually treat women or not. As far as I'm aware, there's not a single bill in any of the states that have outright banned abortion that says, well, a woman can't have treatment for an ectopic pregnancy or treatment for any sort of thing where the fetus is lost to save the life of the mother. As far as I'm concerned, all of those states have provisions for that. So these people, in an effort to strengthen their position and to their perceived position and to try and win over people under the guise of like being kind and nice and all these things, will actually just lie and actually are putting women's health and life in danger by saying these types of things.
Yeah, so it's funny because, like you mentioned, in either scenario, this is bad, where she knows or where she doesn't know. Because if she doesn't know, that says more about you than it does about like a pro-life position or any ramifications of Roe v. Wade. Or maybe it speaks not to you specifically, but the general state of education in America, which is to say that obviously, these laws that are getting passed are not as dire in 90% of the cases as they seem. But if she did know, then all she's doing is helping to, in their favorite phrasing and wording, spread misinformation. Because if you're saying, I didn't know if that was legal and I had to look it up, let that sink in. You could have very easily clarified for someone who wasn't sure, to say, it was okay. I wasn't breaking any laws. And guess what? Now everyone who reads that doesn't have to look it up like you did. So if you're actually not being disingenuous, you would be spreading the actual information around. And that's why I don't think this person is. I mean, other than just, your general intuition and whatnot. So that's extremely frustrating to me to see. And then of course, as you mentioned, the ectopic pregnancy thing, and it highlights how many people are bad at framing arguments from other positions, in particular in the pro-life argument side. And it makes me think a little bit of a Bill Burr bit where he's a comedian, if you're not familiar with him. And he was going on about, I think it was Bill Burr. And he, he's talking about, pregnancy, and he's like, I'm pro-choice, but like when people get so insulting to pro-life people they're like, why are they going crazy? It's like, because they think you're killing a baby. What do you mean, why are they going crazy? On one side it's like, oh no, you're restricting a woman's choice. Yeah, that sucks. But the other side, you're literally committing infanticide. And it's like a joke. And it's funny because this bit, strikes people off as hilarious because of how outrageous he's doing it and stuff, but it also highlights that these people haven't thought about that before. No. And that's crazy.
He has I'm not sure if it's part of the same bit or not, but it's on the same topic. I saw a little bit of it on Netflix, and he basically talks. He's like, I'm pro-choice, but I see their argument because if I put all the ingredients of a cake into a bowl, and then I put it in a cake format, and then I throw it into the oven, and it takes 40 minutes to bake the cake, and you take it out at 10 minutes, and you throw it on the ground.
Yeah.
I would say, hey man, you ruined my cake,
Yep.
And I think that's it's funny and people laugh at it because it's true, right? Or it's revealing truth about the entire situation. So yeah, it's just sad to me because like so much of what the pro-choice crowd will say about like, oh, we need to protect women, or we need to protect the people that are most vulnerable. Women are the most vulnerable, or women's health is going to be put on the line, if we pass this. So much of it is actually just a projection of what they're actually trying to do. And then this person, it's like, okay, if this is such a big, scary thing, like you're saying, why did she not at the end of her post just say, oh yeah, and guess what? It's not illegal. Don't be stressed out, mother who just lost her child and could be feeling really awful right now. You didn't break the law. Everything's going to be okay. And oh, by the way, even if you are pregnant right now and you're worried and you've got some bleeding or whatever, and you're worried you might have an ectopic pregnancy, go get treatment because that's totally legal and fine. It has not been outlawed anywhere. But as always, that's not the case. That's not what they're trying to do. They're trying to stir up a bunch of emotional responses so that anytime a person that is pro-life talks to you, you don't actually get a chance to listen to what their argument is. You're just so covered in the emotion of it that you tune them out right from the get-go.
That's exactly right.
All right, moving on to our next one. We've got Rob Delaney, and he writes, give a man a fish, just give him the fish, a-hole. He's hungry. You've got an extra fish. Hand it over, F-face. He doesn't have time to go to your crappy fishing school. I'm going to count to 3. obviously inferring that if he gets the 3, he'll do something to you forcefully and make you hand over the fish. It sounds very, very much like some other big entity that we know about and is omnipresent in our lives. These people, I know this guy's a comedian. At least I think he's a comedian.
Yeah. This is supposed to be a joke for sure.
Yeah, it's a joke. But this is kind of, I like the last one. This is kind of the indicative of the larger narrative that these folks paint about earning and generating value and all these things. It's like, well, no, like we see people in need. We need to help them right now, whatever the cost. And it's funny because this isn't just applied to welfare. It's also applied to things like Ukraine or Afghanistan or anything that justifies pointing a gun at someone's head, the government counting to 3, and if you don't hand it over, they blow your brains out or throw you in a cage with a bunch of evil people. For all the talk that these folks have about sustainability, we need to have sustainable usage of, cardboard, and we need to have sustainable energy and all these things. It's like, we also need to have sustainable, food. We need to have sustainable ways of running business. We need to have sustainable economics. We need to, if I give the only fish that I have to that other guy, I don't have a fish. Now, who's going to give a fish to me? Are you going to point the gun at another guy's head, count to 3, and force him to give me the fish? And when does it end? It ends when there are no more fish and no one has learned to fish. And the only person that did know how to fish is now dead. And so that there's no one to teach anyone how to fish. So it's just a really, obviously he's meaning to be funny. And it is a little funny because to me, it illustrates how absurd that position is. I mean, he might take the opposite approach and think that he's like pointing out a truth that we should all live by. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. I was gonna say, I mean, if this was highlighted just by itself, I probably would laugh if this joke was told to me. I saw this shared by a group. I think it might have been like the other 98% or something like that. Yeah. So I'm like, okay, you're trying. Whether or not Rob Delaney was making this as a political statement or not, it was being used to moralize, which is why I included it. Because I do want to emphasize, we're not sticks in the mud. Like, things that are jokes that don't line up with our viewpoints can be funny. And I think this one's actually kind of funny. But again, in the context it was presented, I'm like, oh no, people are going to look at this and then think that is a good point. And it's like, no, it's actually a terrible point. Like, for all the reasons you highlighted. But to further illustrate what you were saying about people don't think about this, the renewability and the sustain and how you have to have things to build a renewable economy. That's, I think, one of the reasons why we're now kind of scrambling a little bit because of the birth shortage. One of the reasons, I'd say, so many people aren't having kids, and you need human repopulation in order to sustain and to keep things moving and to be productive and to keep people alive in society. You actually need to have more kids and babies. And that is one of the, there's a spiritual component, in my opinion, but there's also the component that people don't think about that. And they don't think about how you have to build for down the road and long term. A lot of people, in particular, our generation, have grown up with, I'd say our generation and boomers generally, have grown up with more and more wealth and more long-term things having been built and being built. And so we ourselves don't necessarily think in those terms because things are so abundant and so easy to grab. And so, to take all that back to this, silly joke, when he's saying just give him the fish, hand it over, you're hungry, there's humor to that, but the underlying morality of like, no, teaching him the lesson, you're being a doofus by trying to teach him how to fish when he's hungry. It's like, no, actually, that's like saying, well, look, I'm cold right now, just wrap yourself in a blanket. And it's like, actually, no, I need to build shelter because it's going to get colder at night. So I can't just stand here with a blanket because I'm cold. I need to construct my hut so that I can survive more than just now and I won't be colder later on. That's kind of the illustration there that I would use, where, you might want the temporary reprieve, but you do need the long-term lesson, the long-term investment as well. And so this kind of adage, this adage of the teach a man to fish is still very important and relevant, even if people in our age don't exactly think so.
That's a really good point you're making about like time preference and how we have grown up with amazingly huge things that took sometimes decades to build just existing, whether it be a bridge or a lot of the infrastructure that we see. We weren't around when the highways were built or anything like that. We see new highways being built. And there's I'm sure you've encountered now that you've moved down south, but right by the Tacoma Dome, they finally finished all the construction on that highway there. And the age-old joke was that, it's the year 3000. We've got time travel and flying cars, and the Tacoma Dome, construction is still going on. It's like, well, no, that's just how long it takes to build, really huge infrastructure and big things. And because we've lost that, we forget to realize it's like the scenario this guy talks about, which is you're standing on a shore, you've got no other infrastructure behind you, you spear a fish, and it takes you all day to catch that fish. And then the guy next to you hasn't done anything that day and he wants your fish. It's like that's what human, existence was for so long, was you ate what you caught, right, that day. And there was no ability to really save or store things for the future because a lot of that, refrigeration or food storage or mass, production of a fishing pole or fishing bait or things like that didn't exist yet. And so you ate what you caught. And if you caught extra, then sure, you could maybe give some to your fellow man. But like there was no guarantee that there would be extra tomorrow. And your primary thing is to look out for yourself and your family. And so, the principles that got us to where we are today are the exact opposite of the principles this guy is espousing in this joke, or I guess what other people would try to take away from this joke. It's funny in a vacuum. Like you wind up on a desert shore and there's some rich guy there and he's got a fish. He's like, just learn to fish. You're like, well, I'm dying right now. Like that's pretty funny. Yeah. But the lesson those folks are trying to pull out of it does not necessarily apply.
Yeah, and the last thing I would say is even when you think about more advanced primitive societies, so like you think about tribal societies, the reason why a lot of tribes lasted as long as they did is because the hunter gatherers would train their children and their others to do that. They didn't just give them the food and then die out.
Yeah.
And then for those who weren't able to do those things, like generally speaking in most tribal arrangements, women didn't hunt, and so are they, do they not get to eat the meat? No, but they would also provide things of value. They would either gather berries or herbs, or they would clean the meat and prepare it, and all these, so you have this economy of exchange. And so to that point, even when you're not directly teaching someone to fish, you're trading them the fish from a skill, hopefully, or some item of value that they have produced themselves as well.
Which all culminates in survival and full bellies and things like that.
Exactly.
Yes. All right, moving on to our next one. We've got Jen Kirkman, and she tweets, I have a mask on a plane. I am the only one pretty much. I had a question for the flight attendant. She rudely said, quote, I can't hear you, unquote. No one has ever not heard me. I know what she was really saying. Also, I wore masks on planes before COVID for everyone telling me not to wear one. Travel internationally ever? Lots of people do. I'm sorry you've never been anywhere. And this is not a tweet as it may seem from 2020 or 2021. Is from September 14th, 2022. This reminds me of I climbed to Camp Muir on Mount Rainier with a buddy of mine in 2021, and it's open air, probably the cleanest air you could probably breathe in Washington because it's above everything else. There's only about maybe 200, 300, 400 people on the climbing it every day or so. And so we're getting up there and everything. And I look around and I'd say about every 3 or 4 people, there are hikers wearing masks out in the open air, no one around them, way more than 6 feet in between. And I think this person, if they were climbing the mountain, probably would wear it as well. Why does she not wear it when she's sleeping in her bedroom or when she is eating dinner? God forbid. Everyone is exhaling when she's eating dinner, but she should just not eat, or she should eat in some small room with no one else around. It's really disturbing, man. I'm sure you saw the Dave Smith episode, with the actor lady who got Bell's palsy. And she's talking about I got Bell's palsy from the vaccine, but I'm okay with it because this is the price we need to pay to see everyone. It's like, man, what happened to you? You got captured by this. Like, these people have infected your brain with a mind virus. And despite all logic, despite what your eyes can see, to put it in a more Orwell term, despite what your eyes could see, they have asked you to see something else, and you have chosen to see that as well. And it's really sad and unfortunate. And I hope that this person can wake up here soon and see all the data around it, not just the current data, which even by the CDC and the Democratic side's logic, everything's safe and A-okay for them to take off the mask, but also see historically that they were lied to and that it was always okay for them to not wear a mask.
Well, the other thing about this post that made me laugh was one of the top replies I saw was, or maybe the flight attendant just couldn't hear you.
Yeah.
It's like this person has such a victim complex too that made me laugh and cringe. And gosh, I was in in Lowe's the other day, and the cashier had the plexiglass screen up still, which I actually, I don't even hate that in general, because I'm like, you know what, as a cashier, you're seeing a lot of people every day, whatever, that's cool. But even with that, this person was kind of mumbling, or wasn't speaking super loudly, not projecting, and I had trouble hearing them, to the point where finally I just kind of was guessing, and they're asking like, do you want this plan? And I'm pretty sure they're asking if I want a protection plan for some floodlights I bought, and I'm like, no. But I'm like guessing on this stuff. And so when this person is asking, like, I have a mask and I know what you're really saying, like, no one's ever not been able to hear me. Actually, probably a lot of people haven't been able to hear you, and they've just kind of nodded and said, yeah, or uh-huh, or whatever. Because at least in my experience during the COVID times, there were tons of people who I couldn't hear speaking through these masks, especially on a plane where you have the ambient noise going around, a lot of people, and all that kind of stuff. So, and then the other thing is, I travel internationally and wear masks all the time. Sorry, you've never been anywhere. Yeah. Sorry, you've never been anywhere, to a flight attendant. Like, what a stupid thing to infer, or to imply that a flight attendant hasn't been anywhere. And I mean, that's kind of their job. They kind of go places.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of, I would say, communication is nonverbal, including, seeing a person's lips move, because your brain connects certain types of movement to sound to interpret what's going on, and that's why it is so hard to communicate through a mask or anything like that. People put on the bandana and they're like, oh, I can't hear you. It's like, it's the same thing for a mask, when all that stuff is going on. I also think it's just like, so the last line that you brought up, like how elitist of this person. I don't know who they are. They're blue check mark. Yeah. Like, oh, I get to travel internationally all the time. It's like, okay, like, yeah. And it obviously hasn't opened up your mind to think better about this whole deal. Like, you're just as dumb as before. And, anyone that hasn't been able to travel in the past few years, it's been because of this illogic that you've been grounded and not able to go anywhere. My wife and I wanted to go to Thailand back in March, and we weren't able to, because they required, if you could go if you weren't vaxxed, but you had to quarantine for 10 days in a state mandated hotel, which was very, very expensive. And who obviously wants to go spend 10 days in a hotel on vacation instead of actually going and seeing stuff? So it really limited where we could travel. Yeah, the whole travel thing with COVID's been ridiculous. And it's just so funny that it's just like, there's still this almost the same amount of COVID in a lot of ways. Like, if you look at like how many cases there are and like the tracker on Google and all that, it's like, it's about the same as it was when they were shutting things down. But, for whatever reason, because the powers that be have deemed it okay, there's no need to wear a mask. And that alone should give this lady peace and pause to stop wearing her thing and tweeting this out. I don't know why it doesn't.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing about this, just that makes me cringe too, is the way that she infers someone saying something without saying it. Like this, like she's inferring this passive aggressive, I know what this flight attendant was really saying when she couldn't say. And you think more broadly about people on the left generally who are this way, although sometimes people on the right are this way too, but usually it's people on the left. And how they're so intent on policing speech and policing all these different ways of things that you can and can't say, and how you can't make these implicit threats and all that kind of stuff. And it boils down to, where do you draw the line of who gets to interpret what message I'm saying, and why do you get to determine what I'm saying by things I didn't say? You know what? I it's hard for me to I haven't fully thought about this until now, but it's just, they're very much of the mind that they have to police what you are and aren't allowed to say in so many cases. But when you say things that aren't, but they can also interpret things that you did not explicitly say and then punish you for them regardless. So it's like, why do you care what I say one way or the other if you're just going to read whatever you want into it? It's this really weird passive aggressive thing, and I don't know if it's a right left split. I feel like it's a little bit more on the left there, but I don't know, that also rubbed me the wrong way. I haven't been able to fully.
Well, do you know where it stems from? It stems from, have you heard of the platinum rule?
No.
So it's this. I was just talking with a friend of mine who was doing some work at in construction at a tech company, and they have it plastered on their wall. And the platinum rule, you're familiar with the golden rule: do unto others as you would have done unto yourself. The platinum rule, which is supposed to be better, is treat others the way that they want to be treated. And so that's where it stems from, right? Which is like, well, if I view myself as being deserving of such and such a treatment, you owe it to me to treat me that way. And it creates all sorts of problems and issues, including the one that you're kind of talking about right now, which is this lady's like, I want to wear a mask and I don't want to have any of the consequences that go along with wearing a mask, which includes someone might not be able to understand me. And if they don't understand me, it's because they don't want to treat me with respect. They want to treat me horribly, and they think that I'm dumb and crazy and all this stuff. So it leads to that really unhealthy thought pattern. I had a buddy in college. He's African American, and I remember he was checking out, and he made a post about this. Love the guy; he's a great dude, but he suffers a little bit from this. And he was checking out at a self checkout in Target. And, this is a Target in a not so good part of Washington. A lot of theft and things like that. So they had a security guard at the self checkout, and he went around examining everything. And he happened to be white. And this guy posted about it. He's like, yeah, like I was checking out, and the security guard was really examining me. Do you think he'd be doing that if I was a different color? It's like, that's his job, dude. Like, he's there to stop theft. He's making sure that everyone is doing what they're supposed to do. You weren't the only one being, looked at. So yeah, it does it. It exists on the left, exists on the right. But I think the mindset and the kind of the framework that these folks look at life through, it's more predominant on the left.
Yeah. Well, and to that, I will say, I don't even doubt that there are cases like that, but it really undermines your case when you give examples like that, where the area is not, not good. They've had a lot of theft. You have a little
exception,
bit more,
though. It's not the rule.
Yeah. No, exactly. I was going to say, you have a little bit more credence when I think of the example of like Senator Tim Scott, the black senator, I think the only sitting black senator in the U.S. Senate right now. And one day he forgot his like badge credentials or something like that. And the security guard was super, like he let other people go through, but he was very like, I'm not going to let you through. I don't know who you are, kind of a thing. It was, and I can't remember the exact context. He painted it, and I was like, okay, that gives me a little bit more, only because of the context it's in. But the problem is that when people, like in this case, for instance, you're on a noisy plane, you're wearing a mask, and the flight attendant says, oh, I can't hear you. That's not a scenario where you're like, ooh, that seems like she was really trying to say something more, And it's like with the case with your friend, it's like, well, probably not the right area there, because if you're in a Target where there's been a lot of theft, they're going to have security guards who are watching everyone. So, maybe he was right, but that doesn't help your case when you give these very fringe examples that don't, that make it the most logical jump is not that you were targeted. The most logical jump is that person was doing their job, or they can't hear you.
Yeah, exactly. All right, moving on to our next one. So this was a person that replied to Per Byland, great economic professor at Oklahoma State, and of our persuasion in the libertarian movement, at least. And he posted a chart basically saying, hey, like, it's kind of crazy that if you put $1 under your mattress, I think it was in like 1912, if you put $100 under your mattress in 1912, it would be worth, it have the purchasing power of like $3 today. Basically saying like, oh my gosh, like, look how much inflation we've had. Isn't it crazy that we've now, when we save money, it actually is worth way, way less. We shouldn't normalize this. And the Federal Reserve has created this by printing money. And then this fellow replies to him. He's like, the Fed didn't create this, this being the situation of inflation. And he gives an example. You and I each have $1. We both want to buy an axe. The axe seller says, I have one axe for sale in 12 months. You put your $1 in your mattress. I invest my $1 and it becomes $1.25. I offer $1.15 for the axe. You have $1. OMG inflation, obviously mocking Per Byland's assertion. Then he continues, now, your point of view is your dollar just decreased in value. My view is that it didn't. The value of the axe just went up because I was smarter. The first thing that popped out to me when I saw this, man, was what did you invest it in and what grew from you investing it? Like, is it just because you say this dollar is invested, it suddenly is worth $1.25? Like, things, when you invest money, it means that you're creating more product. The other side of it that's ridiculous about this scenario is that there's one and only one axe, and that is produced in 12 months, and there will never be another axe produced ever again after that. Or there will never be more than one axe for sale at all, ever, at a time. This might be kind of true of art, right? Like art is something that will inflate in price based on how much, how much wealth everyone that wants to buy that piece of art has, because there's only one thing of that art. So everyone's going to bid that art up until, until someone says, no, I'm not going to pay, $50 million for it. So the person that bid $51 million, gets that piece of art. The question I'd ask this guy is, okay, sure, like you get the first axe off the line for $1.15, but everyone else still has $1, and the axe seller still wants to sell as many axes as he can. Is he going to say, sorry, 1,000 people that want to buy axe, you don't have $1.15. It's going to be you don't get to buy an axe. No, he's going to lower it, and he's going to say, okay, like you get the first axe, sure, but I can't sell it for $1.15, so I'm going to have to sell it for $1. And so this guy has this weird scenario that's in a vacuum where things don't continue to be produced, and that supply and demand, the law of supply and demand, doesn't exist. What are your thoughts?
Well, okay, so the first thing that comes to mind for me is, it's like, generally speaking, the seller determines the price, not the buyers. So it's weird that, this person is saying that, oh, the seller says that it's going to be $1 in a year. That's kind of a weird thing, first and foremost, unless he's getting the money right away, right? Like if you're paying for a pre-order or paying for the production of something, that's different. But this person is saying, I'm going to sell it for this price in a year for $1. That's weird to me, because that's not how most things work. And then secondly, again, the buyers generally aren't the ones setting the price. So if he comes and says, I'll pay $1.15 for it, if the price truly is $1, he probably wouldn't accept the $1.15, and he would just say whoever came to it first and bought it. But the second thing is, this has nothing to do with what the Fed did or does. So it's like, look at this scenario and say, I'm going to sell my axe in 12 months. And instead of him, pre-setting the price, because that's, again, not how things really work. Let's say he's just saying, right now, the cost to make an axe is $1. I will have an axe in a year. And then what happens is the Fed floods the market with dollars. And so now the fact is that the dollar value is now worth less, because you need more dollars to get the same materials, because the people in the coal mine are, the guy who sat on his dollar in the mattress now has $2, and he can offer the same $1.15 that the guy who invested it did as well, right? And
Yes.
so now everything is up and increased, and now the axe that was on sale for $1 is now on sale for $2, because everyone got handed out another $1. And so things don't cost the same anymore. The time difference between 1 year and now, if the Fed disrupts, by printing more money and interfering in the marketplace, you're not going to have the same price as you did a year ago. So it's just a very weird example, because people don't generally chart out their prices and advertise them in a year. In particular, when the Fed's creating interest rates, you might have a business plan and a business strategy, but that's also more responsive to the market, and it's more responsive to what the economic tides are. You don't plan in a year for what the reality is right now. You plan for what you think will happen in a year. So you generally don't lock in and commit like a dollar price for something for sale for a year.
Yeah, and I think this guy had like 30 comments on it, but this was the best and dumbest bit, so I had to choose it. And his point that he was trying to illustrate is that, like, more money doesn't cause inflation. It's more the more you expand economic activity, the more goods that are produced, the more things are going to cost. Which is just, it's like, no, that's not how anything works. If I'm trying to think of like Halloween candy, right? Like the house that has the nice huge candy bars are usually the houses that get the most attention and most foot traffic, whereas the houses that have, maybe some Skittle bags, I like Skittles a lot, so maybe it's not the best example, but the more common candy that is not as valuable, that is not perceived as awesome, are not going to get as much foot traffic, or not going to elicit as awesome of a reaction from the kids that go there. And so, this guy has this point that, like, he invested it and suddenly becomes $1.25. It's like, no, you invested it, you produced more of something else. And then you, because you've accumulated that, now have a lot more to offer this person. That doesn't mean that the value of the dollar has gone down. It's actually stayed the same. You just have more of that dollar. What Per Byland is saying is that by printing more and more money, the value of that dollar is worth less and less and less and less because everyone has it. And to make he's almost close to the right type of logic. He's like, well, the more you can offer someone, the more they're going to charge for that, right? Because supply and demand. But where he gets it wrong is that like you generated more by creating more actual things. Whereas when the Federal Reserve prints money, not more actual things are made. So there's more and more dollars chasing less and less goods. And so the guy that sat on his dollar gets helicopter money. And he has, like you're saying, he has $2. And so now, even though you invested and you scraped away another $1.25, even though you saved it and you helped generate that value, it's still not enough on you because, like you were saying, it costs more to create the next number 2 acts. And so all roads lead back to the Federal Reserve and the pain that we are feeling right now.
Exactly right.
All right, moving on to our next one. Our last one. We've got a pretty long thread by James Martin. And Don, who is this again, Donnie? He's here in Seattle.
Yeah, he's a Catholic priest in Seattle who's kind of the bastion of left Catholicism that everyone likes to point to. But I don't think he's anything more than just probably I could be mistaken, but I don't think he's anything more than just a priest of a big Seattle parish. I don't think he's a bishop. I don't think he's I don't think he actually has a ton of authority but in the like the Roman Catholic hierarchy, I don't think he has a ton of authority. I think he's just, he's the equivalent of like a local Protestant, like pastor of a church.
Sure. So he's got a thread, and this is what he writes. Once again, the Supreme Court will take up the question of whether someone can refuse to do business with a same-sex couple because it offends their Christian beliefs. But notice that these business owners don't have a problem with, nor should they, serving non-Christians. These Catholic business owners have no problem serving Protestants, nor should they, who don't believe in basic Catholic beliefs, papal authority, the virgin birth, etc. Nor do these Catholic business owners say that serving Protestants would compromise their faith. More broadly, Christian business owners have no problem serving Jewish, Buddhist, or Hindu customers, nor should they, who didn't believe in the most fundamental Christian beliefs like the Trinity, the Incarnation, and the Resurrection. In other words, these Christian business owners have no problem serving people who don't believe in Jesus, perhaps the most basic Christian belief. None of these Catholic or Christian business owners have said, as far as I know, quote, if I am forced to serve a non-Christian, it would mean that I was supporting someone who doesn't believe in Jesus, and this is something that my conscience will not allow, unquote. In the guise of religious liberty, Catholic business owners could deny services to Protestants, and more broadly, Christians could deny services to Jews, Muslims, Hindus, Buddhists, atheists, agnostics, and so on. But this, as far as I know, would be illegal. So if this is about a business owner's conscience being offended by serving a person with different beliefs or a person who practices something different that they find offensive, then the most generous interpretation is that their consciences are being highly selective. The only matter that seems to offend the conscience of these few Catholic and Christian business leaders in same-sex marriage is same-sex marriage. So let's not call this a case of, quote, religious liberty. Let's call it what it is, homophobia. Man, to this I would say, dude, do you think that should a Jew be able to be forced to make a cake with a swastika on it? Like, I think this guy would probably say no. I mean, that goes against all of our existing preconceptions about what freedom is and what people should or should not participate in. Even if we don't grant that, like, let's just say it's like the actual examples on the books, whether it's the cake bakers down in Colorado. I think there's actually also one that just lost a case down in Olympia, here in Washington State. But these folks didn't say, we can't serve you because you're gay. What they said is, we won't print or make a cake or make a product that affirms your belief system. We'd be perfectly happy to make any type of cake. At least I know in the Colorado bakers example, it was, I'm happy to bake you any type of cake you want. I just won't put 2 men on it. The guy also went as far as to refer him to other bakers that would make the cake with the desired design that they had on it. And so you and I would even go as far as to say that it's okay for, we don't think it's good, but in a free society, it's okay for someone to discriminate based on someone's beliefs. That person probably won't be in business very long because it turns out that everyone has tons of different beliefs. And if you're a business person, discriminating against 90% of the audience that you could have, you're probably not going to have a really great business. But all that aside, this is not representative of the reality that we're facing, in the United States right now. It's just people being forced. People don't want to be forced to participate or affirm certain practices that they don't believe in, and that is perfectly okay. And the same right that doesn't force a Jewish baker to print a Nazi swastika on a cake, and say some anti-Semitic slur, is the same right that a Christian has to not put two gay men on a cake.
Yeah, and I mean, like you highlighted, I think the very first thing to contend with is the fact that he is being disingenuous from the start. Disingenuous from the start, because he says that they're only doing that because of it offends their beliefs, and it's like, no, it's because the action they were asked to commit violated their beliefs, not who they was. But either way, their beliefs, it shouldn't be a legal matter if their beliefs were violated just by serving a homosexual couple or not. Like that, the law should have no business policing what people think and the morals therein. It should only come into play if it comes into play when actions are taken. So that's the first thing, is that he conflates this, and that's not the case. But even if it was, the law should not, unless this person wants to set up a theonomy or a theocracy, the law should not say you have no ability, no legal right to refuse someone if their identity offends your conscience. Like that should not be in play, because my conscience is my conscience, my thoughts are my thoughts. The government has no role in that. But second, so that's not the case though. So obviously, he conflates them to say, okay, so the only people they don't want to serve are gays, and that's not true. That's not true. They would also, probably refuse to serve a cake that was celebrating a cheating scandal. Like that. If I was a baker and someone wanted me to bake a cake that was like, oh, what's the occasion? Oh, we're just celebrating the fact that I left my family and cheated on my wife. I would refuse to make that on moral grounds just as well. And as I'm sure all of these other people would too. So, his whole point about it's only this group of people. It's like, no, this is the only group of people that's continually asking for this, and then continually not respecting the wishes of the baker, respecting or angrily leaving. They're the ones who are trying to force them to commit it. But the third thing that I think about this that came to mind is that I think that a lot of this actually comes from a misunderstanding of economics, because the way that you and I understand economics is that there are two parties and they exchange things and they both feel like they've come out the better for it, right? I have $5. You have a cupcake. I want that cupcake more than I want my $5. You want my $5 more than you want your cupcake. We exchange. I walk away thinking, this is great. Sad I don't have the $5, but I've got this great cupcake. And you're great. Got rid of that cupcake, which I made, and now I've got $5. Those are two reciprocal members of an exchange. They are equal in their status there. But that's not how this person thinks about it, because this person, gosh, I actually haven't looked up to see if Father James Martin had, but I would not be surprised if he was on the bandwagon of, say, boycotting Chick-fil-A for their beliefs, right? But in that case, he's saying that it's okay for a consumer to refuse to do business with an organization because of that organization's stated beliefs or the founder's stated beliefs. But if you flip the script and you say, oh, but it's not okay for an organization or a founder of an organization to not serve certain people or to commit certain actions because of their held beliefs. And that is, again, this distinction that somehow once you start producing something as a human and you get called, quote unquote, a business, you are no longer a person. You no longer have agency, and you now have to be this machine corporate entity that people tend to think exists. And don't get me wrong, I do think big business is not great, but the complaints that people level and critique about how businesses aren't people almost never have to do with the fact of big corporations and the ways they get in bed with the government. and almost always have to do with violating the rights of individuals who work in a business. In particular, when it's a small business run by like a single person or like a married couple or maybe like 5 people. The only difference between them and a consumer is they are choosing to create something to sell, and a consumer is choosing to buy something to consume. But they're both equal partners in that transaction. And people like Father James Martin only want to say that it's okay for one to act out their conscience when they're the consumer, but not when you're the producer.
That is a fantastic point about Chick-fil-A and like how we see consumers as something different than business when it's just like you're saying, it's just 2 people engaging in a voluntary transaction. One person generated dollars, the other person generated a chicken sandwich. The person with the chicken sandwich cannot force the other person to give them dollars. That that's literally like Chick-fil-A launches this new initiative where they send their really, really nice customer service people out onto the street with a chicken sandwich, and they say, "Hey, I'm a Christian. Please buy my Christian chicken." And when the person says, "No, I don't want to buy it," you say, "You are a bigot and a racist because you don't want to buy my Christian chicken. It must be because of that." That's a really great point about that. And I just wanted to affirm that. The other side of this, people, like I said earlier, like as libertarians and anarchists, we don't really believe in the government have any ability to enforce anti-discrimination laws or anything like that. And I think a lot of people will say things like, well, what about, the era of segregation and Jim Crow and all these different things? And to that, I would say, well, the only people that were really actually enforcing that, I mean, yes, there were businesses, and I'm sure some businesses were happy to go along with it, but it was a law by the government. If you had a business and you saw, wow, there's a big opportunity here, like I can access a bigger market for my business in the Deep South by opening up and selling to people of color, you were legally not allowed to, and that was enforced by the government. And so, all the stuff that these folks talk about, like, we want to have the government involved and all these things, like, it only ever makes it worse. It only ever makes it harder to be a good person. It never makes it easier to be a good person. And as we like to say in the show, the government is not something that can actually make us into better people. It cannot actually change culture. It is all downstream of culture. And so when they try to, force people to do this or do that or enact some law, it's either behind the times, it is either too restrictive, or it doesn't actually solve the problem. And so that's why repealing all these things is good. And like you're saying, in economics, in a free market, the people that are wanting to fill different niches or open up their market, open up their business to the most amount of people, or to make the most amount of revenue, or to sell to the right amount of people at the right price, are the ones that are going to survive. And the people that don't adapt are the ones that are going to die. And if everything is truly better by, not, discriminating all this stuff, like businesses are going to do what they're supposed to do, and it's going to lead to a better world because more voluntary transactions are going to occur. Why would you want to buy a cake? Why would you want to give money, your hard-earned money, to someone that you think hates you? It's just so weird to me that these, it's proven out they did more discovery of these folks. The couple in Colorado, at least, went around investigating which bakers they thought they would have the highest chance of getting to elicit this reaction from, of not baking the cake. And so they purposely went to this specific baker and asked him to bake this specific cake because they knew it would make him say these specific things so they could sue him and make their point. It's like, look, if you don't want to, I don't patronize businesses that I don't like what they do, or I don't like that they have some sort of cause that they support or anything like that. And if these people think that this baker is this evil, ugly person, like, there's a bakery down the street that would have happily made their cake for them, and they'd be richer for it. And the baker in Colorado that didn't make it would be poorer for it. That's a lot better than creating all this hubbubalum.
Absolutely right. And the last thing I would say that makes me laugh a little bit about this particular post too is how he, in the last bit of it, he says, so let's not call this a case of religious liberty. Let's call it what it is, homophobia. And the funny thing to me about that is he apparently gets to deny what counts as religious liberty and what counts as religious, fervor or whatnot, which I think is the biggest problem with the law. And even in, legal terms that we like, such as religious liberty and protections of religious liberty, it's how far does that go? And to give him credit, there is a line of absurdity there, right? Because you can't say that religious liberty would extend to me stabbing you involuntarily because my religion told me to do that unprovoked. Um, but the problem is he's arbitrarily defining this line, which is what all laws and all courts inevitably do, which is why they are terrible arbiters of morality, why they're terrible bastions of, religious freedom. It's because even when you enshrine religious liberty into your documents, then you have someone coming along here saying, well, if you are very hypocritical in your implementation of your faith, which again they're not, but for the sake of this argument, let's assume they are. If you're a hypocrite, well then you can't. That doesn't fall under religious liberty because you're not holding equal parts of your religion up in every single respect. And one, that's impossible to do as a human because one of the core beliefs of our religion is that we're fallen and imperfect. But so no matter what, you can't hold to all parts of your religion equally per our beliefs. But even if you could, why does he get to determine again what does or does not constitute religious liberty? If maybe my religious liberty is good in one area and bad in another. My religious liberty lets me speak boldly proclaiming the gospel on the street. But what if I'm not doing that every day? Does that mean that I forfeit my religious liberty in other areas because I'm not actively spreading the gospel like I'm told to? So it's a stupid test that he's going to shift the goalposts whenever he can to say, oh, well, first I'm going to misdefine what your religion, our religious calling is and what you're defining as religious liberty. Then I'm going to say, because you're not upholding to your religion in every single aspect, then this particular action doesn't get to fall under religious liberty. Therefore, there's no legal protection for it. And that's, again, the problem with the law, because that will always happen with legal cases. People who are elected are not good on religion. They're not good on much of anything, frankly, but they're not good at restoring or preserving the integrity of your faith, and so I would recommend not relying on them to do so.
Awesome. Any more on it? I'm good.
I don't think so.
Awesome. Well, folks, thanks for hanging out with us for this show, and we will catch you on the next one.